I don't have a lab rat at home, but I do have 2 Irish wolfhounds. And I suppose I could flex a little bit and say, before it was cool, I had my Irish wolfhound on rapamycin.
So I guess if we go back to the beginning, why are we looking at rapamycin? Why are people even taking this now? Because it's kind of ran the gamut of all the model organisms. So all the way from yeast to roundworms to mice, and now a couple of studies that have been done in dogs. And then there's also one cat study that just came out. Now those are kind of restricted to looking just at cardiac function, but not really any worrying safety concerns in those model organisms. So the mice, the cats, the dogs, when they're using these sort of protocols and dosing that they've outlined.
Yeah, I don't have a lab rat at home, but I do have 2 Irish wolfhounds. And I suppose I could flex a little bit and say, before it was cool, I had my Irish wolfhound on rapamycin. Some people are familiar with Dr. Matt Kaberlein. He's done a lot of podcasts, Dog Aging Project. I think he's with the University of Washington. And it's basically a program to put dogs on rapamycin that have high incidence of cancer. At some other time, I'll probably do a podcast with a vet and talk about high incidence of osteosarcoma in wolfhounds and Great Danes and other types of dog breeds. A third of them get it. They have a bimodal life expectancy distribution. My oldest wolfhound is about 3 years over his life expectancy, so I'm very happy with that. And again, no need to go into that today. There's a lot of other things that he's on as well for people who are interested, but we'll get into that in a different podcast.
Yeah, and if I'm thinking about this and looking at the data, what do I think? If rapamycin was a once weekly pill and it got an indication for something outside of its current indication, I think the use there would be for preventing the cardiac complications of high blood pressure. Well, you could probably do a similar thing by lowering someone's blood pressure with a medication, because it's that pressure overload. It's going to stress the organ and have an mTOR response and have enlargement of the organ to meet that need. And a lot of times that's maladaptive. So if you put someone in the general population, a lot of people do have high blood pressure, they're getting too much mTOR activation, and you put them on rapamycin, this is why I think would actually be a better candidate drug in the TAME trial, which down another trail is metformin in adults, I believe 65 to 80, to see if it can delay some of these things, major adverse cardiovascular events. Heart failure, I presume, is in there. It affects a significant number of people. But that's where I would kind of put the money at. I don't know that it would necessarily give someone an extra 10 years or 15 years of lifespan, but delaying heart failure 10 or 15 years would be substantial.
That seems like a pretty good benefit. I guess to play devil's advocate, why would we take things like rapamycin or metformin? I've heard that metformin's an anti-androgen. You want to take BCAAs to build muscle, right? Is it just they want us to be weak and small?
Yeah, there's a balance there, and I think there's actually I don't know if I'll be able to dig up the reference, but looking at mice and putting them through strenuous exercise, high protein diet, or building up their aerobic capacity, in the first half of their life, you actually want more of those growth factors around. And then when mice hit, middle age, which is probably something like 450 days for your average mouse, maybe a little bit more, depending on how well they're cared for, which we'll talk about later.
Yes, we will.
But then at that point, excess of that mTOR signaling can become detrimental. So you probably see a similar phenomenon. Someone who's 20 years old, relatively healthy, trying to be very even healthier, let's say, or like anti-aging, taking rapamycin for them is probably not going to have a substantial effect compared to someone who is, your average 60 or 70-year-old.
The analogy that I use for this is it's the investment account of your body composition. That's your IRA 401k. You want to work hard, invest as early as possible. Yes, even as a teenager in your early 20s, you're investing in that retirement account. You might not be enjoying it or looking forward to it, or maybe you are enjoying it. But even if you don't want to build up your bone mineral density, which really should be done during adolescence, after that retirement account, you're no longer qualified. You can't donate into your Roth anymore. You've already gone through your teenage years. After about early 20s, it's really hard to gain significant amounts of bone mineral density. But you can still build in the retirement account when you're 70 years old. Like you mentioned, you probably don't want to be working 3 different jobs, 90 hours a week. You're probably going to burn out. There's a higher incidence of side effects from doing those things. Excess growth factors, keeping your IGF-1 at 300. So that's the way that we look at it.